Welcome, everyone, to a special Saturday edition of the Signals from Mars live stream brought to you by the Mars Attacks podcast and by VMRIT.com. We have a very special guest tonight, Mr. Todd Severin of Ripple Music. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. It's not often that I get to speak to the head of a label or that a band believes so much in the label that they're on that they keep telling me, you need to speak to Todd. You need to speak to Todd. So,
oh, that's cool. Who's that?
Yeah, Eric Kluber of Void Vader. Eric has been in my show more than anyone else. He was on episode number 1. This will end up being this will end up being episode 227 if I'm not mistaken. So every episode or every band that Eric has been in, I've interviewed him at least once in that band. And since he's been in Void Vader, I think I've interviewed him 3 or 4 times, and Lucas I've interviewed twice as well. So
Eric is a guitar Viking, man. He's like somebody he's like off the television show. He should have been an extra in the Vikings TV show, but like with a flying V on his back instead of a battle axe. That's Eric.
Right.
Yeah, he's a great guy. They're a great band. So wait, episode 1, which band was he in then?
It's funny. I think he had just left White Wizard at the time, so it was pre-Gypsy Hawk.
Okay. Yeah, he's got quite the discography, doesn't he?
Yeah. A White Wizard, Gypsy Hawk, Void Vader. He played a little with Scattered Hamlet, played with Intronaut, played with Iron Knot. There you go. Not Intro. I always get the two confused, but it's funny because when he was in that band, I played that band to death. So I still get confused on the name. But anyway, I do want to thank the people that are joining us in the chat as well. Jeremy up in the UK. And I believe this may be your wife on Facebook who's joining us, you mentioned?
That is Mrs. Racer, Mrs. Ripple. She makes everything run here, man. Without her, nothing happens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So starting off, I wanted to ask you, when you were a kid, what was the catalyst for you what piqued your interest to just listen to music, nonetheless get into music?
Oh, wow. Okay. Everybody has their story, of course.
Right.
My childhood home was not a peaceful place, we'll say.
Okay.
It was full of discord, and there was a lot of intrafamilial strife. And the one time in the family when things were calm and peaceful, and the family could actually get together, was when my parents were playing music. So when I was a young kid, I remember very distinctively, like Dad would bring home the new Cat Stevens record, and he and I and my mom would all gather in the den and listen to the Cat Stevens record. Or I remember Neil Diamond's Hot August Nights and the Hair soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Gordon Lightfoot and lots of Simon and Garfunkel. So those were like the best memories I had in childhood, because it was when the fighting stopped.
Yeah.
And it was just the music. And my parents, even though I wouldn't say that they were really into music, they were really into listening to the music.
Gotcha.
So when you listen to music, you would listen to the music, and we'd all sit and listen to it, and they would comment on the vocals or the singing or whatever. And so all that started entering my brain. And then when I got old enough, which was probably AM radio first, kind of becoming FM radio, but let's just say it started when Kiss Destroyer record came out, because that's when I was old enough to just lock myself in my room and play music at top volume and use that to drown out everything else that was going on.
Right.
And then it was just me and my music. And so, that became a shelter. It became a place where you were protected and safe. Just me and Gene Simmons.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I always talk about how, a lot of people like to compare, let's say, a band like Metallica. Why haven't they put out another Master of Puppets? Or why haven't they, and people don't understand that emotional connection with an album during certain points of your life. So even if they were to try to mimic that album, it would never live up to it. So an album like Destroyer,
it wouldn't live up to it for us, but there might be some other kid where that new one, Master of Puppets 2, becomes our Master of Puppets 1.
Right. Well, possible. Yeah, perfect example. Okay, so my son is actually turning 10 on Monday, and both of my kids have always grown up around music, and due to video games, due to the video game Fortnite, AC/DC had a whole AC/DC day on there when their last album Power Up came out. So because of that, my son started listening to their last album, to Power Up, and out of the blue, he just says to me, Dad, I really like the last AC/DC album. I've been listening to it a lot, and I think it's my favorite album that I've ever listened to right now. And it kind of clicked with me. I'm like, this is someone who is unfiltered, doesn't care about what the lineup is, doesn't care if Malcolm is in the band, doesn't care if it's Bon Scott, doesn't care. And I started to think, when I was a kid, I listened to Destroyer for the first time when I was 4 years old because my brother was 6 years older than me. He had a live 2 and Destroyer, and that's all we had in the house. Everything else was Spanish pop music and like Julio Iglesias and stuff like that. So to us, Kiss was our escape as well, and I can, pinpoint albums. The same thing is what you were saying, where things were in a certain way, and I would have to go in my room and lock myself away and listen to an album, and that was my way of saying, okay, we need to overcome this. This is what's going to get me, or this is going to be my force field in the meantime for me to, face what's on the other side of that door. So when you were saying that, I understood exactly what, where you were going with that. And at the same time, what I think is great about what you're doing with Ripple is that the palette is so wide of what you have with the bands that you have, the artists that you do have on the label. For a new music fan who doesn't have to, sit there and overanalyze things, where you have to, I think it's a lost art of just getting lost in the music, to put an album on and try to connect with it. Like you're saying, just listen to the music. Even if it's going for a ride in your car and just getting lost in the music that you have on. There are too many things with the internet where we have to psychoanalyze. Well, this sounds like this, or so-and-so's a better guitarist, or this isn't metal because it doesn't have this aspect. There's so many rules and so many things now that didn't exist when Destroyer came out. There were, you talk about AM and FM radio. I remember listening to that in, stations out of New York where you would have pop music, rock music, funk music. It would all be mixed together. Everything didn't have to have a label on it. And then all the musicians at the same time kind of learned from all those different styles to kind of make their own thing. So, sorry, I kind of, you touched the nerve kind of with your response. So I just felt like, I wanted to share that with you.
No, I really appreciate that because, one thing about music, and as you go through different life stages, the things that resonate with you and the way that you resonate with things changes.
Right.
And music is as intensely personal as it can get, because as you said, it's not just the song, it's how that song has filtered into your persona and how it's filtered into your memories and into your experiences. And that is never more powerful than in those formative years. You said you were 4. I was 13, I think, when Kiss Destroyer came out, and I'd never heard anything like it in my life. I never heard Kiss. One of my best friends had an older brother, and he was like the cool kid, like he had the big fro, and we all, wow, and he was like a star athlete. So everything he did was cool to us. And he had this great record collection with like Led Zeppelin and all these bands. And the truth is, I was listening to AM radio. I didn't even really know who a lot of these bands were, but he loved them and we thought it was cool. So me and my buddy were drawing all these bands' logos before I even knew what their music was like, And so I'd heard of Kiss, and I was
Hmm.
big into comic books at the time. And I remember I was in the store, and there was the Kiss Destroyer record. And come on, if you want a piece of artwork that's going to attract a 13-year-old comic
Yeah.
book loving kid, right? And I knew it was this heavier music, but I just didn't know what it was like. So I bought it, and I went home, and the friend who I was with at the time was a Elton John fan, and we put it on his stereo. And it starts off with Detroit Rock City,
Yeah.
which starts off, as you know, with the vocal, the radio, all the sound effects before it gets into the riff. And so when it's on, I mean, Simon and Garfunkel songs never started like that, right? You know,
Right.
and then the riff starts building, and I was like, wow, what in the hell is this? And my
Yeah.
friend freaked out. He goes, oh my God, wow, what are you listening to? And I'm just like, what am I listening to? This is amazing. And Detroit Rock City was like that first like epiphany moment for me. I mean, I probably had heard some heavy stuff on AM radio, Zeppelin, Stones, whatever, because they had hit songs that were being played on AM.
Right.
And I was probably just tuning into FM radio at the time. But that became like an epiphany where the world of music changed to me. And not only did it change in the way I was hearing it, but that was purely my music.
Right.
My parents hated it, which was even better, you know? And so it became just my personal release. And so we all have these associations with music. The first time you hear something, you can probably remember where you were when you first heard it, if it was an
Yeah.
impactful song for you. I do this with my wife all the time. I go, oh, honey, this is the song that was playing when we drove down into Thornbury the time when we were going to the castle to get married. And she's
Right.
all, what? And I go, yeah, I remember. It was Pink's, I'm coming up. I remember when we hit that scene because that's just the way my brain works. My wife and I travel a lot, and she takes a lot of photographs and does videos and stuff like that. I take none. I've traveled the world tons and tons of times. I don't take photographs, but
Hmm.
wherever I am, I buy music, and I buy the indigenous music,
Right.
and that becomes my photograph because I can put that record on, and no matter where I am, it could be Turkish classical music or Maltese pop music, whatever. I can put on a Maltese album right now, and boom, I'm in Malta, and I remember
Right.
everything about that trip. That's just the way I work with music.
Yeah. Similar thing happens to me and my wife is I was like, how do you retain these memories? I said, well, because it triggers a certain year, a certain place that we were at. There's always, it's just the way some people's minds work. So I get it. What made you want to start the label?
Um, well, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I'd never thought about it before.
Okay.
Um, I had started a music site called The Ripple Effect, which was a blog I'd started with a buddy of mine called The Pope. And that was just to write reviews on music we had in our own collection. Just I liked writing, I liked music, let's do a blog just for fun. And through the blog, I started reviewing a lot of proto metal, the
Okay.
early 1969, 1972 time period, before, right when psychedelia was turning dark. And these bands, Sir Lord Baltimore, Dust, the Budgie, all these great bands that weren't Sabbath. Sabbath, of course, being amazing.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot of this proto metal stuff, and I was really, really getting into it. And through that time period, I reviewed bands like Bang, Sir Lord Baltimore, and I reviewed Leaf Hound as well as the JPT Scare Band. And JPT Scare Band's drummer wrote me after I wrote my review. And he goes, dude, blah, blah, blah. And he and I started talking, and we talked on and off for about a year. And then one day, a big stack of unreleased master CDs was
Hmm.
mailed to me. And so I looked at this, and I got this, and I still have them. I got this killer stack. If you've never heard JPT Scare Band, I mean, they were just what they say. They were a scary heavy band, 1971. They never even really recorded at the time, or they recorded, they never put out an album at the time. They were just guys and their friends who go into this basement in Kansas City, get really stoned, and play the heaviest music they can come up with. And finally, their stuff was released in the 90s on a label called Monster, which is what I had reviewed. But he dropped me all these unreleased masters, and I said, "This stuff is amazing, but I can't review it. It's not released, But thank you." He goes, "I don't want you to review it. I want you to put it out."
Oh, wow.
And it was like, "What? What are you talking about? I don't know. What does put it out even mean? I don't know what that means." And he goes,
Right.
"Listen, I like you. I trust you. You'll do a good job with our music." So I spent about a year researching what it meant to be a record label. I'm a music junkie. I've always loved music. I have zero talent. I have less than zero. Actually I'm a talent vacuum. I will suck your talent out of you if I'm in your presence. So I was never going to be up on stage as a musician, but I like being behind the scenes. I used to be a radio disc jockey. So as I was thinking about this more, it's like, you know what? I could do this. This could be an amazing way for us to work with some amazing bands and help expand, the music to the world, and get the word out on what these great bands are doing, whether it was these older bands, which is kind of the way the label started, or more modern bands. And so after researching it for about a year, just kind of took the plunge. And the very first record we put out was JPT Scares Band's Acid Blues is the White Man's Burden.
Was there any specific label that you looked into, or any figurehead? Because I mean, you, especially in hard rock and metal, you start to hear about like a Brian Slagle or like a Monty Connor or people like that.
Right.
Was your idea to try to look at what other labels had done and try to take the best of what you could out of them, or even fashion yourself in a way after anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you're ever going to do anything, you should always start off with your history and learn from the successes and the mistakes of those who came before you. And I know Monty and I know Brian now, and they're great guys, and full respect to everything they've done. My label that I probably latched onto more though as a business model for us was Sub Pop.
Okay.
And the reason is that Sub Pop, as you know, came out of a certain scene, out of a certain area, and it came from being a fanzine, right?
Right.
And then they started including, I think, some 7-inch singles in their fanzines. I think they did some cassettes, and that's how the label started. And so since we were a blog before we were a label, there was a similarity there. And
Okay.
so I kind of, and to me, a label like Metal Blade or Nuclear Blast, or I know I'm good friends with Mike Varney at Shrapnel. I mean, those labels are legendary to me, and I never even worked on the assumption that I would ever be able to create something like what they've done. I never would be mentioned in their breaths, and I'm not. But because they're up there. But so I don't think I looked to those particular labels as much for inspiration, because they were too far out of my grasp. But Sub Pop, I can understand. And I can do a real DIY thing, because it had to be DIY. I got a day job, and I don't, this was 2009 that we were starting, and we didn't even know how to press records. We didn't know anything. So I was really, really on a shoestring budget, and Sub Pop resonated with me. The way that they came from the zine, the way they did their 7-inch subscription series, just the way they cultivated their fans, that was probably more the model I followed.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. I mean, just the way that how you described it, I think a lot of people's mistake when they want to get into any area of business is not what you're saying, examining the history and finding out what worked, what didn't work, and find a model that is close, even if it's not exactly the same, because Sub Pop obviously is geared more towards their scene. But if you can take a business model out of that and fashion, do it your way, that only makes sense. No one is going to reinvent the wheel. So if you can take a wheel that's already been made and kind of make it your own and make it fit what you're doing, makes complete sense.
If I had thought about it at the time, I've since read the autobiography of the founder of Megaforce Records.
Okay.
And the way he started his label was pretty darn DIY. I really don't know exactly how Slagle and Connor got their labels off the ground. To me, it was like the clouds parted and the Ivy Fortress fell down and they stepped in.
Right.
Sure. I'm ignoring all of their hard work and toil, but to me, they're just so legendary. But Megaforce started out of being just this little stall at a flea market selling records. So probably could have looked at there, but then again, I didn't have Metallica give me their demo tapes.
Right.
I was working with a 40-year-old acid band from the 70s that nobody's ever heard of, so still wasn't a great similarity.
No, I get it. Again, a lot of people don't realize that given circumstances or given certain events that take place. I was having this discussion with someone earlier this week. One of the things that I've done over here is is help bands with making coherent lyrics. If you're trying to sing in English and you want to get across to an English speaking audience, don't use Google Translate to translate your lyrics. Run it by someone who knows the language and says, well, this kind of doesn't make sense. And I once had somebody say, well, Max Cavalera's lyrics back on the first few Sepultura albums. And I said, A, it's not 86. And B, you're not fucking Max Cavalera.
Right.
And not for nothing, I'm sure his wife, who was his manager, and his kids who were born in Arizona are not going to let him release anything that isn't coherent. Not to say that those first albums weren't, but obviously his English got better due to needing it to get better. People don't understand that, you have to work in the current time frame. So if someone were to jump on and try to make a label now, the chances that, Metallica's demo drops in your lap
may not happen.
So, I mean, to go into the game already knowing, hey, these are my parameters. This is what I got to work with. I mean, I think you're ahead of the game of most people, because obviously it's not going to be easy to start. So if you have certain, if you're already pointing the ship in a certain direction, you're already winning some of the initial battles.
So one of the cool things, and in saying I didn't have Metallica's demo tape, I don't want that in any way to denigrate what I did have, which was some amazing stuff from JPT Scare Band, because what that meant to me, and really the only reason that the label happened and that I felt that I could do this, was twofold. The first one was the whole proto metal vibe was starting to resonate with a lot of people again. As the doom scene was growing, a lot of people saying, hey man, did you check out Dust? Do you know? And JPT Scare Band was getting a lot of love. In fact, I got their information to even review them from reading an article in Classic Rock Magazine, which was written by Sleaze Grinder on, the history of metal. And so I was really into that scene, and I knew that it was growing. So I knew that I had the potential to reach out to an audience who would recognize this band. So I wasn't taking Bill's band down the street and trying to make Bill's band happen. I was releasing archival material from a band that I knew some people would want. So that was leg up number one. Leg up number two was kind of just fortuitous, but when I was a blog, I got to know a lot of other blogs. And so I had connections already with a certain aspect of the media. And every once in a while, when press releases would come out to me, the press release, the promo company would forget to blind copy it. And so I would get their entire mailing list. And sometimes a email would come to me with a press release that had 200, 300, 400 other media sources on there. And even though I didn't have a label and I had no reason I should care, the first time that happened, I just said, I should save this. It's like that's somebody's Rolodex. There's value there. I don't know why. And so I started saving them. And so by the time Ripple started, I already had a Rolodex of media contacts that was about 12 to 13, 1400. So I started writing all of our original press releases, and I can immediately get that out to 13, 1400 sources. And that's something that, not every starting label would have the chance to do. So I had kind of two legs up that to me said, okay, I got this. I'm crazy. My wife said it's okay. Let's do it.
Cool. And obviously you're talking about the beginnings of the label, but how do you feel that the label morphed? I mean, obviously you were focused on the proto metal initially, but you started expanding and started going out into other styles within hard rock and metal at the same time to kind of cast a bigger net. Was there something specific you had in mind? Okay, we're going to go after bands that are more in the doom subgenre or more stoner bands? Or was it just a case of listening to music and just saying, hey, this is cool, so this is who I want to go after?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the archival sort of stuff, by the way, has always, that thread's been there, like the Best of Bang, we've done a Leafhound live record. So I still love that proto metal. And I have a couple projects coming up that I'm not telling you about right now, but I got a couple of projects. I got one really big one coming,
Cool.
uh, and you'll love the band. And so I still love that stuff. But I mean, you could really trace the label's focus to a particular minute in time.
Okay.
Because at the beginning, we had some of the archival stuff, and we were kind of playing with just some cool bands that we had been hearing about. Like, and there's a band from Canada called Fen, who I really adore and love, and they're a little bit more of a progressive rock band. And we had a few other just kind of scattershot releases, would be the best way to describe it. But we didn't have a focus. It was just like guitar rock.
Right.
Well, then there's this one day, it was Mother's Day, and it was probably 2010, maybe 2011. And I'm at the Mother's Day buffet, and I get a call on my phone, and I look at my phone, and the call's coming from Tony Reed. Now,
Okay.
Tony Reed, as you may know, is the main guy of Moss Generator and Stone Axe, and he's in oh crap, he's in the band Big Scenic Nowhere. With a bunch of the other desert rock legends, and Tony's he's a genius. He's a musical genius.
Right.
I did not know Tony. I did not have Tony's contact information. Yet when he called me, it still said Tony Reed, which means like God wanted me to know this was Tony Reed. It's like one of those things. Like you don't have to have his information in your phone already. He's Tony Reed, you know.
Right.
And so I go, what the hell's Tony Reed calling me about? I kind of had emailed him before because I reviewed a Moss Generator record, because Moss Generator kicks ass, as you know. And so he had called me and asked me if I wanted to do a split with one of our bands we were working with at the time called Mighty High, and do a Stone Axe Mighty High split. He was in Stone Axe at the time. And I said, yes. You're Tony Reed. Yes, I'll do it. Please keep talking to me.
Right.
And that led to him saying, do you want to re-release the first Stone Axe record? Which I said, yes. And do you want the Stone Axe 2? Yes. Do you want Stone Axe Live? Yes. And then it kind of led to, hey, what about the first Moss Generator record? Yes. And then we actually were partly responsible for Moss Generator reforming, because they were done at the time.
Right.
But we did the 5-year anniversary, big deluxe reissue of their first record, 10-year anniversary. I apologize. And that kind of led the original Moss Generator coming back together. And so their first record back together was Nomads, which was released by Ripple. So Tony he clicked at that moment, and it was like, okay, this is really the focus of where we're going, not just Tony's music, but that vibe, that sound. And then from there, I just expanded it in other directions, because I don't want Ripple to be pigeonholed. It's got to have, like you said before, it's got to have variety.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a way to describe to someone, hey, this is what a Ripple artist needs to be? Because I look at all the bands, and like you just said, it can be a few different things, but there isn't like one main focal piece where you can look at a special or certain labels and say, they focus on this, or they focus on this other format, and then they don't come out of that box.
Right. And, part of it might be because my own musical taste is so varied that I don't want to be like that. But more than that is, I mean, the heavy underground where we are, it's really, really vast, and it's really fertile. And so if you're going to look at the core of what a Ripple is, to me, I don't think of myself as a stoner label. I don't think of ourselves as a doom label. I don't think of us as heavy psych. I don't think of us as heavy metal. We're a heavy rock label, and it encompasses all of that stuff.
Right.
And if there was one core quality for the vast majority of music, and you might point to a few items where it kind of there's an aberration, but it doesn't matter if we're doing heavy sludge, doom, occult, heavy psych, heavy rock, metal, stoner, or just good old-fashioned doom. Ripple's got a groove. I like the groove. I like music that moves me. Full respect to people that are into dirgy funeral doom. I fall asleep. It doesn't catch my attention. It might be from the era where I grew up. Come on, I'm listening to Destroyer. I'm listening to Detroit Rock City. Whether you like this or not, that song's got a groove. So all of Ripple has got a groove. Talk about Void Vader, kind of that new wave of American heavy metal. They're heavy, but yet they're melodic with a groove.
Yeah.
And that groove is kind of what keeps me running through, I think, the common thread of most of our releases.
Yeah. Funny, we circle back to Kiss. There's an argument that I've always had with people where I've always brought up the fact that I thought, based on the sound that Hotter Than Hell has, that to me it was a huge influence on the stoner scene because of how it was tuned, how it sounded sonically, but yet the melodies and different things that are in there kind of help to bring out certain things that, when bands aren't just influenced by, say, Sabbath, you have other bands that have a band like Snail comes to mind, who I think is heavily influenced by Cheap Trick or Kiss when it comes in the vocals. So I don't know, maybe call me crazy, but I think that Hotter Than Hell has a huge influence on a lot of what stoner and a lot of what doom metal, the more melodic stuff, kind of that had a big influence on, is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, because I actually had this conversation with Craig Riggs and
Okay.
Tim Katz. Tim Katz is from Roadsaw, and I think he was in White Dynamite at the time that I was talking to him about Kiss, because Tim Katz is a huge Kiss fan. And to me, and you have to understand, I've been a massive Kiss fan my whole life now. Now, Kiss is the greatest band in the world, and they're the worst band in the world. I fully get it. And I really don't listen to too much after they take off the makeup. I mean, or even up until the makeup went off. I had my time period, and I'm kind of done with it. But
Right.
Of Kiss's classic recordings, to me, their number one absolute best album is Hotter Than Hell. The debut is an amazing record. It's got some fantastic songs on it, but it's a little bit light.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of Dress to Kill. I think it's just kind of a weaker album in general. The songs they're a little too poppy for me. I
Right.
got a Destroyer, but it's overproduced. It's a different vibe that they were
Yeah.
going for. And there's something directly about Hotter Than Hell. First of all, it's got Ace Frehley's best kick-ass songs. I mean, Parasite by itself, I think, is a bigger influence than a lot of people will ever say. It is such a good song.
Right.
And I love that whole record. And it even has a song like Going Blind, which is just a twisted song. And that is just a weird and twisted song.
Right.
I love Hotter Than Hell. That is my favorite Kiss record.
Cool. So finally, someone that I speak to that actually backs up my my theory.
Tim Katz agrees with you.
Cool. A few months back, it was announced that Blasko was going to start working with you guys. How much or how important is it for the label to bring someone like Blasko in? A lot of people know him just from playing in Ozzy's band, but from a business side of things, he's managed a ton of bands. He's worked, behind the boards in certain cases as well. So it's someone who's really well-rounded in the industry overall. So how big of an impact is it for Ripple to have someone like him on board?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing opportunity for us to work with somebody who has got a lot more experience and a knowledge base that's different than mine. Because music is not my day job. Like I told you, this was something I created. The thing about Blasko, of course, you nailed it. He's known as the bass player for Ozzy. He did play with Danzig. He did play with Rob Zombie. So you got this guy who's been on stages in front of 100,000 people, but he is so in tune with what's going on in the underground, and he doesn't just tune into it, but he's actively involved. He promotes it. He has his podcast. Right. He loves this stuff. The dude just loves music. And he and I just became friendly, talking, via Facebook. And then we had a few times we were chatting back and forth with texting about various things. And I was just thinking that this guy is so involved with what's going on. Wouldn't it be awesome if we just created a platform where he could pull out some bands that he really does enjoy and give him the platform to release them? So my original thought was that I would be creating like a series of releases, like I did with my Second Coming of Heavy Split series. But this would be a series of releases within Ripple that Blasko would curate.
Right.
And I presented that to him, and he just kind of went with it. I have to admit, I didn't necessarily know where or how our relationship would develop from that time.
Right.
But he's involved with every step of the process with these bands. He's executive producing the bands. He's involved in the artwork. He loves it, and it's a thrill to work with him on all this. So, of course, bringing somebody like that into the label is great because it's got its own ability to raise the label profile, of course.
Right.
And that's great for all of the bands on the label, right? Because
Mhm.
now everybody's kind of just been slightly elevated. And he has picked a few bands off of the current Ripple roster and added them kind of to his stable of bands that he's working with.
Oh,
Now,
cool.
our very first release under the Blasko Presents banner, he doesn't like that term. They're not called Blasko Presents releases. He hates that. I like it. He hates it. But that's the way I think of them still. Is
Right.
going to be Holy Death Trio, which comes out in September, I believe,
Okay.
or August. It might be August. And then we have High Desert Queen, which is coming out in September. And then we have Mother Iron Horse coming out in November. So we have 3 of those releases coming to fruition this year. And then it's going to be really interesting to me to see how the relationship, the business entity that we're working with together, to see how that evolves. And to
Okay.
see, like you were talking about, the business aspects that can be brought to that fruition of things, and to see where
Mhm.
that goes. Because right now it's he and I working so directly with each other. I'm bringing my knowledge of how we need to do the label end, and he's bringing his knowledge on how he needs to do the band and the executive producing end. And then when that record gets out, let's see what happens.
Cool. I mean, it only makes sense to leverage someone's knowledge. I mean, if you're able to work with him, why not?
Right.
It just it, again, I think a lot of people don't realize how important making connections with people is, and then being able to maybe figure out, hey, how could I work this into my situation? How can we set something up so that I'm leveraging his knowledge, his background, I mean, Blasko Presents would have been like the seal of approval. That's like instant street cred right there. So
Right.
I get it.
Like you said, the guy manages Clutch. He manages the Black Label Society. He manages Zach Sabbath. He manages Black Veiled Brides. He's conducted world tours. He brings a knowledge base and has access to a Rolodex that I don't.
Right.
And I didn't bring him in expecting to access that Rolodex.
Hmm.
I will be honest with you. Of course, I'm aware Blasko is Blasko. I wasn't quite that calculated when I approached him. Uh,
Right.
I, I thought he would have a lot of fun. I thought that he would just have kick-ass time doing this. And the truth is, since Ripple isn't my day job, I do it for fun. To
Right.
me, this is my main. I don't golf. I
Hmm.
put on fucking heavy metal, and that's what I do. and this is I do it because I love it. Come on, Ripple. I've never taken a paycheck from this. If this was a job, I would be unemployed. I'd be homeless on the street in the gutters. I do this because I love it. And that guy is as passionate about it as I am. So although on a business model, there's a lot to have gained, I wasn't either. I didn't have that much foresight, or I just wasn't that calculating.
Hmm.
I really did it because I thought this dude would love it, and he does love it, which is awesome. Now we'll
Cool.
see what happens. I mean, I'm not ignorant. I know what the guy can bring to the table. I don't push him for that stuff. I figure
Right.
he'll bring what he wants to bring, and that's the way the relationship will work.
Awesome. Okay. Was it a surprise to you that you would be releasing cassettes in 2021?
Well, it would be a surprise if I ever did, because I hate cassettes and I haven't done it.
Okay.
we've licensed some of our bands to have cassettes made because
Okay.
there's cassette labels that want to do that, and
Hmm.
some of the bands really want cassettes, and I will absolutely do whatever's best for our bands. I personally hate cassettes, and I just have never been motivated to put one of our own out. But that's because one of the first cassettes I ever bought, brand new, I mean, true cassette, was Judas Priest British Steel, which is a freaking amazing record, right? That was my my first Priest record, and it lasted about 3 days before my tape cassette ate it. And I said, forget that. I hate cassettes, and I never really have gotten into cassettes ever since then. I used to like making my own. I like my mixtapes, and I like taping other people's records. But I hated pre-production cassettes because you get eaten, and it's always pissed me off. So we haven't done cassettes, but there's a lot of good labels out there. There's Stoner Witch Records, there's Sludge Lord Records, there's Tri-Droid Records. We've kind of worked with all three of them when they have an interest. Like I think Void Vader, I think Stoner Witch came from Void Vader, but they come to me and they go, "Hey, we really like this record. We really like High Priestess. Can we put out the cassette?" I go, "Yeah, go for it. I'll give you the permission, no problem."
Cool. Yeah, with the label though, you guys have been doing a lot of really cool vinyl. It speaks to the fact that there's still a lot of collectors out there. There's a lot of people that love vinyl. Do you feel that your business gets affected by the streaming services, or due to the fact that there is a hardcore base that loves their vinyl? Do you feel that really doesn't affect you?
Well, you bring up a very interesting question, but you also have to let's go just a little bit historically back to when we started. Ripple started in 2009. And if you think back to what was going on in 2009, vinyl had not yet made its resurgence.
Right.
CD sales had plummeted to a fraction of what they were, and there was no iTunes. There was no monetization of digital music yet at that time. It was all Napster. So I started the label at the absolute worst possible time historically in the entire existence of the music industry. The worst time to start a label is when I decided this would be a good idea. Let's go ahead and do it. And not only that, but the very first record we put out of a 40-year-old acid blues band that nobody really had ever heard of in the main world was a double LP gatefold two-tone psychedelic translucent vinyl.
Right.
Because that's what I fucking wanted on my record shelves, because I have a lot of records. That is one of 13 shelves.
Okay.
And that doesn't account, just the crap that's all over it. Seriously. So I wanted to put out product that I wanted my own record collection. I mean, that's half the fun of it, right? And I'm a vinyl guy. So we always launched into vinyl. So to get back directly to your question, it's kind of the opposite for us, because I started at the nadir. And what's happened since then is that vinyl has continued to grow at a rate of about 35% per year since 2010. Which mathematically now means that vinyl sales since that time have increased several 100%.
Right.
And I'm in that. I've always been plugged into that already.
Right.
On top of that, you now have the digital sources of streaming, which do provide revenue that I didn't even have at the time. And there are still some countries that buy CDs. So to be honest with you, from my point of view, we're in a healthier place now than we've been since the label started. Now, I didn't start my label in 1980, where I was pressing 5 million copies or something,
Right.
But but we sell out for most of the pressings that we do now. That's because there is a ton of people who are into vinyl. More people are getting into it every day. And what it speaks to is kind of what you were talking about at the very beginning. You want to lose yourself in a piece of music, and it's so much easier to do that when you got a cool record and you got an amazing piece of vinyl that you could be looking at. And all of our records, we're always going to be including inserts or liner notes or stuff, so you can just sit there and you can be tripping on the cool artwork, while the cool vinyl is spinning, and you're all this is an experience. And that's why vinyl is selling, is that people want that tangible experience again.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think a lot of people, and this was kind of brought to my attention by a friend of mine that runs a site called Ghost Cult Magazine.
Great
and
name.
Yeah,
Great.
he talked about the fact that, because his day job is marketing for on the business side of things he's a marketing consultant. So he was talking about how a lot of bands kind of look at streaming in a way that they don't leverage it enough, in the sense that it should be used as a promotional tool to drive people to a cool piece of vinyl, to a cool piece of merch, instead of just crapping on it all day long, as opposed to saying, hey, check it out. If you like it, buy the physical.
You're so right. And not even buying the physical. What people are forgetting right now, and I've had long discussions with people on Facebook forums about this exact topic, and I can give you my point of view on it. When I was a kid, I told you we had AM radio, and you listened to AM radio, and a band would get played. I don't know, whoever, choose whatever you want. The Carpenters close to you, okay? I was always on AM radio, right? They got paid a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. It was like 0.00001
right
pennies per play. And they weren't bitching that they weren't getting paid from the radio play. The radio play existed to get the band known. And then the media, the label at the time, the media companies would utilize that to do what the labels could do. And bands need to look at it that way. Now, there's one difference with Spotify that I have to acquiesce on this one just a little bit, and that is that you can choose what you listen to, and you cannot choose what you could listen to on AM radio. So there is a tiny quasi ownership aspect to Spotify, which didn't exist with AM. But that's just the playing field. This is what's being presented to you. You have a band, okay? These are your options. Spotify is going to pay crap. So you're not going to be looking at Spotify as a source of revenue. You're going to be looking at Spotify as a way to connect with followers, to connect with listeners, to get onto playlists, to use your Spotify numbers as a way to position yourself so you can get into better shows, get onto better tours, get people to your website, get people to your Facebook and your social medias so you can interact with them. It is a tool. It is your new AM radio. Do not expect to get paid from it. That's not what it's about. It's not iTunes. It's not a service where people are actually buying it from you. It's a place for people to listen to you. It's great. It's fantastic that it's here. And it's fantastic that there's become one which is more popular, because if it was, Pandora and eMusic and Spotify and yada, 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 like it is with everything else, because we've lost AM radio and we've lost FM radio. There used to be, when you were growing up in New Jersey, you had one radio station, right? And you were a rocker probably. So all of your friends, all of you guys listened to that one radio station. I don't know if it's the one the trunk was on or not. It doesn't make a difference. Wherever you were, you guys had a radio station. And if a song broke in that radio station, they could break a market. But what happened before Spotify started dominance is that the dissemination of the attention, the space was so large. There's no way you can build that sort of a following with 30,000 little options, because they're all going to get that much smaller piece of the pie. I'm glad Spotify is big. I'm glad it's a place people go, because you can get onto the Spotify, you can get onto the playlist, and then it's up to the band, and then it's up to the labels to make the most of what's being presented to you. Don't bitch about it. You're not going to change it anyways. Sure, maybe the royalty rate can be better. I'm not going to argue that. Of course, it can be better, but that's the way it is right now. So work with what you got. Make it work for you.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's funny. I saw a few months back, they showed Peter Frampton went on to bitch about it. And I've brought this up several times on my show. And I'm thinking, well, hasn't Peter Frampton gotten ripped off by like 3 managers over the years? So maybe someone needs to be more on top of their finances to realize what he's supposed to be getting paid. And also, if an artist sells off all their publishing to get a lump sum payment, are they expecting that streaming is then going to pay them millions of dollars somehow?
Songwriter's share would be a fraction of the fraction.
Yeah.
Did Frampton sell off all his publishing?
I don't know if he did, but I know that there are others that complain about it who have sold their publishing off. Like you can guarantee that someone, like a Nikki Sixx, every time he has to promote something, is complaining about either YouTube or Spotify. And he sold, he sold his publishing off, I think less than a year ago. So,
full respect to Frampton. By the way, I actually am a huge Frampton fan. I just got this recently, which is the Frampton and the original demos for the Stillwater from the movie.
Right.
I love Frampton, but perspective. I bet he wasn't sitting there bitching when his songs were being played on AM radio and he wasn't getting big checks.
Right.
And I'm just going to keep going back to that, because if you stop thinking of Spotify as the service which is stealing your music and barely paying you for it, you start thinking of it as a service which is disseminating your music. Well, great. And whatever you can get paid is a bonus. You got to look at it another way too. There's two types of people in this world. There's people who listen to music, and there's people who love music. People who listen to music probably were never going to buy it anyways. To them, the music is something in the background. They may or may not care. Sure, they might have certain songs they like, but if they can bring it up on Spotify, fine. They're happy. That's their world of music. The person who loves music is going to buy it. So, the fact that people are listening on Spotify, to me, doesn't take away from the core audience of the people who are still going to be buying your music. And in fact, you might be reaching out to more of them.
Gotcha. Okay. Jeremy in the chat asked a question. He says, I'm interested to know where you sell, or where you sell to by country. Where's the demand from? Also, shipping costs are very high to the UK. I wanted to buy Void Vader vinyl, but the shipping doubled it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy, by the way, is a kick-ass listener in that chat room, man. He's paying attention, and he writes some good comments there. So thanks for tuning in, Jeremy. Good questions there. The main question that just to answer for you is that Ripple releases are available in every country on the planet. I think that's maybe not all of Africa, but we're South America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, all the European countries, UK. We are available through multiple distributors. So on a distribution basis in the UK, for example, you can get it at Plastic Head. If you're over on the continent, you can get it from Suburban or from Season of Mist or Burtis Records or Borders or Goodfellows. I mean, we have a distributor in Spain as well. So we have multiple sub-distributors that can carry our stuff. And if they don't have it, you can always ask them to. And they should be getting it into the record stores. But beyond the distribution, specifically, Jeremy, for you, is that Ripple has its own EU store. We started that up about 18 months ago. We know we ship from America, obviously, and postal rates are ridiculous. Me buying from Europe, or me shipping to Europe, it's all the same. It's terrible. So we opened up our own EU store, which is run by a company called Speaker, SPKR, and it's based out of Austria. So you can get all of the Ripple releases, at least that are in stock at the Ripple store there, directly from Europe. You don't even have to go through a distributor. If you just go to, I think it's en.ripple.spkr.media, I believe. Go to the Ripple website, www.ripple-music.com, and you can see there's a link there for the EU store. So anybody who's in Europe can buy directly from us at European shipping rates. Other aspects of the question that you're asking, we really do sell everywhere. I think that our biggest, Jeremy, you're killing me, man. He's commenting that sadly the UK is not in the EU, so you get hammered anyways. You might still get hammered, but you'll be hammered less than you would buying from America, I would guess. But you can always try Plastic Head. Plastic Head is based in the UK, so you can go there to get your records. Our biggest countries for fans tend to be UK for sure, Sweden, Germany, Australia. I think those are our biggest audience. Netherlands is another good one. So we have a pretty good European fan base, which I love because, I love working with European bands. In fact, this is going to be, you ready for some breaking news? This is your breaking news on your show. And nobody knows this yet, but you and Jeremy. I'm in the process right now of starting a full-time Ripple European office based in Berlin.
Oh, okay, cool.
And the purpose of Ripple EU is going to be number one, A&R for all the European bands, of course, but tour coordination with the bands, being available because of time differences. It might be easier to get information from the EU office,
Hmm.
coordination of other aspects of the things that might need. We might be able to set up a merchandise shipping facility so that we can help our bands get their merch out better because it's too expensive to ship merch from America.
Right.
So the Ripple EU office in Berlin, it's not something which is going to happen. It's like happening right now.
Okay, cool.
It's just about ready to be announced, and you got it first.
Awesome. Another question that I had regarding the vinyl. We've been hearing lately that supposedly there's a shortage in the material needed to make vinyl. A lot of it had to do with the whole jam up in the Suez Canal. Um, can you speak to that? Is that accurate?
It is, yeah. Vinyl pressing right at the moment is in a bit of chaos. It's a bit of an issue, and it's multifactorial. The tie-up in the Suez Canal, of all things, was a problem because the raw materials for a lot of vinyl pressings were tied up in those ships, and so
Hmm.
that, of course, will get itself straightened out. But it's worse than that. If you can recall, 8 months ago ish, there was a big fire in Southern California at a plant, which was one of the few places that made the lacquer for lacquer masters.
Ah, okay.
So not all vinyl pressing needs a lacquer master. A lot of it is DMM, but those who were involved with lacquer mastering, there was only like 2 plants in the world that could do it, and one's gone, and it's not coming back. So that threw a crimp into things. Worldwide shipping has been a disaster since COVID happened. Everything is back. It's just a operational aspect. The logistics have been completely ruined. And then there's other strange things. For example, as you know, there's only so many vinyl pressing plants in the world. If I was smart, I would open one of those, but I'm not that smart and I don't want to do it. But for example, at some of these pressing plants in the midst of COVID, you would have rules that would state that instead of two people working at one press, you could only have one person working at a press, and you couldn't have people working at adjacent presses because they were too
Wow.
close to each other. So you
Right.
now have vinyl pressing plants that can only function at a very limited capacity because of strict COVID regulations. And then the final thing is, since vinyl is coming back, and since all the majors know this, and since Record Store Day in particular has become so big,
Hmm.
you get this twice a year massive Record Store Day crush of. I got something the other day. It was like one of 5,000 copies made. Well, Ripple doesn't press 5,000 copies of anything, and that's just one of what this major's pressing.
Right.
So I'm not knocking it. It's just the way it is. Um, so the majors are tying up more and more of the press time. The press time is more limited. The materials to make the vinyl are more limited, and the shipping of the vinyl is more limited. So it's a massive quagmire right now. I've heard that some vinyl pressing is being backed out as much as 8 months now, which is a long time to wait for a record to be
Wow.
pressed. Should be about 2.5, 3 months.
Wow.
So it is true. It's sad but true. In the words of Metallica, it's sad but true.
Do you think that over the course of the next year or so that will kind of work its way back to what it was before, with stuff like the
Yeah,
pandemic, you know?
to some extent. I mean, assuming pandemic goes away, that'll help take care of that. The Suez Canal thing will work itself out. That's not going to be a problem. Shipping will get itself sorted back out. That won't be a problem. There is still a vast shortage of vinyl presses in the world. Jack White of the White Stripes did the world a favor in opening up one that he opened up,
Mhm.
which I think is in Detroit or in Michigan somewhere. But you can't get records pressed there because he's backed up just like everybody else is. We need
Right.
more vinyl presses. And so the fact that there's still a limited amount of vinyl pressing and there is still this massive surgence of vinyl that the majors are investing their product into, you're going to be constantly fighting for limited amount of resources. So this happened before about 2 years ago, where all of a sudden things really took a big delay, and it
Mhm.
did work itself out within about 12 to 18 months. Um, this one, I think, is going to be a little bit harder. I think that the majors are so invested in vinyl right now that the limited presses is still going to be a problem. So what does that mean? Well, from a label's point of view, from a band's point of view, Ripple has always functioned on a 4 month lead in anyways. I just did it because vinyl typically took 2.5 to 3 months. So
Mhm.
if I had a 4 month lead in, that gave me time to troubleshoot issues, to get the product, get it to the band, let them do some pre-release stuff, whatever, make sure my distributor had it, so everything was going to be running fine. So now that the delays are happening, because I had a built-in cushion anyways, we haven't yet had our own releases delayed. We've been fortunate, but I hear it's coming. So
Right.
I am now pushing my lead time to 6 months.
Hmm.
Before I got on with you, I was just putting to bed December releases.
Okay.
Um, and hopefully I can keep my lead time at that 6 month mark. And if it stays at 6 months for the rest of my life, that's okay. As long as I've prepared for it,
Right.
the bands understand, and I got my lead in built. The labels that got in trouble are those who are, working more on just a release by release basis, and they weren't really thinking about the lead ins. And maybe they had a 2 or 3 month lead in, they got hammered to 5 months. There, you got to sit around for 2 months waiting for your records to come.
Right. Is there, I mean, the only thing that I could think of as an example, is there anything similar to like an IPA vinyl plant where there's small, shops out there that can make smaller limited runs as opposed to just working with the bigger plants?
There are a few. I think the problem truly is the physical existence of vinyl presses on the planet.
Okay.
I, most of the I think that I might be wrong about this, but I believe that what Jack White did was brought to light, brought online the very first new vinyl presses since the 70s.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And it's just like, and I think that there was, I saw a report that some warehouse they found there was a couple vinyl presses in them. But like you need to get people who's going to invest the money and start manufacturing new presses. So
Mhm.
it's not really just the existence of the companies. It's you need presses. You need the physical
Right.
presses. What exists right now is running 24 hours a day. Two people on a press, side by side shifting, just going 24 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Good, good problem to have though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if there wasn't anything to sell, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Um, what are some of the upcoming releases that you can talk to us about that people can expect to see from Ripple in the next few months?
Oh, we got a great schedule. If you can, that board behind me right there is what keeps my life in order.
Okay.
Um, that is one of 4 boards that I have in my office that I keep
Okay.
track of every single thing, um, what everything that needs to be done with every single release because there's multiple aspects, right?
Right.
So, yeah, we got some really cool stuff going on right now. In July, we're releasing the Sun Crow double LP. Have you heard Sun Crow?
I have not.
Oh man, these guys, it's exactly what I was talking about with Ripple. It's really heavy, it's
Okay.
really doomy, and it's really sludgy, but it moves.
Okay.
It's got a pulse, it's got a vibe. They were nominated for a Doomy. I think they were nominated for the best debut record, which is this album.
Okay.
But they had just done it digitally, so we're doing the full worldwide release on that record, and it's going to be a killer record. That's coming up in July. We also have chapter 3 of our current split series, which is called Turn to Stone. And this one is 2 bands, one called Wizard and one called Merlin, who are friends. And they've been having a meme war on Facebook for like 18 months. I mean, and they're hilarious guys. And they're just ripping each other new one on Facebook. And so I finally wrote them. I said, dudes, if you're going to keep doing this, let's take it to vinyl. Come on, you want to have a war? Let's do it right.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
each band wrote one full side of their war with the other band, and it's all psychedelic doom, and
Cool.
uh, and that is chapter 3 of the newest split series that we have, which is Turn to Stone, which followed the conclusion of the Second Coming of Heavy, and then coming up in August, just to touch on this one, is that we're working with the desert rock legends of Yawning Man, which is Mario Lally and Gary Arce, and we're re-releasing their first 2 records, and that's just a thrill, to be working with the guys that actually created the scene. I mean, Mario is the guy that had the generator that brought to the desert to create the generator parties. I mean, it was like his generator. You don't get more ground zero than that.
Absolutely.
And so these are their first 2 seminal releases. And so we'll be working with them on those. And we have the first of those, Rock Formations, is going to be coming out in August.
Cool. Where should people go to keep up with Ripple Music? Where do you prefer to point them? Is there a specific platform or?
I think that the best platform is Facebook.
Okay.
Either the Ripple Music page. We have a Facebook group, which is called the Wave Riders Unite. You can find it just by searching for it on Facebook. And we're on Facebook and we're on the Wave Riders page pretty much all day long. I update that 3, 4, 5 times a day. Our cool. Instagram is current. We update the Instagram at least 2 to 3 times a day. I tweet at least 2 to 3 times a day. Our website is updated, but that's updated more like on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So if you really want to know what's going on, our best aspect is probably Facebook.
Awesome. Cool. I want to thank you for your time. The discussion was far beyond what I, imagined. I've always said this since I started doing the live streams again, because one of the knocks was that I wasn't getting huge names on the show all the time. And I said, well, I just want to have a good conversation with someone about music. And I think that we were able to accomplish that.
All hotter than hell. You're back anytime, man.
Awesome. Todd, thank you for your time, and much success to you and to Ripple going forward. So
thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the support, and keep doing what you do. It means the world to the scene.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Todd, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was my interview with Mr. Todd Severin from Ripple Music. Please check out their Facebook. Check out the label site as well if you want to pick up any of the music that they are selling. They're doing a lot of unique stuff with the vinyl. Obviously, I brought up Eric from Void Vader. You guys have always given me a positive reaction with regards to Void Vader, and they've done a lot of cool stuff with the vinyls that they've released for this latest album. So like I always say, support the bands you love. Go to Spotify, go to Apple Music, check the stuff out. And then I realize that not everyone is in the same monetary situation, but if you can go out and purchase a vinyl, purchase a t-shirt, do it. Support a label like Ripple that is doing the right thing and getting young bands and getting bands of all styles of music out there. So that is it. I want to thank everyone who joined us in the chat, everyone who is listening to this on playback in the podcast version, or if you check this out later on YouTube. Thanks for spending the time to check what I do out. It is very much appreciated. And that is it. We will end this show and expect to see this, up on the podcast in about a week or so. So thanks for your time. And that is it. We will see you here next time on the Signals from Mars podcast / Mars Attacks podcast.